In the spring of 2020, millions of people stood in front of empty supermarket shelves. No flour, no rice, no toilet paper. Panic in the aisles, empty hands at the register, arguments over the last bag of pasta. In that exact moment, in thousands of homes, a different kind of family walked calmly down to the basement, flipped on the light, and saw shelves from floor to ceiling. Canned goods, wheat, beans, enough for a full year. These families had not hoarded, they had been preparing for decades, a few dollars at a time. So how do you build a supply that carries a family for 12 months for less than $30 a month? The answer is simpler than you think. And it is almost 100 years old. Many people think a supply like that costs a fortune and demands an extreme hobby. The truth is the exact opposite. To understand why an entire community fills its basements, you have to go back 90 years into the Great Depression. In the 1930s, the American economy collapsed. Banks closed their doors, fields lay fallow, families stood in long lines for a single piece of bread. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, often simply called the Mormons from the outside, watched its own members go hungry. And it made a decision that would shape the next century. Instead of waiting for help from the outside, it built a system of its own. A system in which every family could provide for itself and in which the community caught those who could not manage alone. That decision did not come out of nowhere. It had a history rooted in pain. In the 19th century, the Mormons were violently driven out of Missouri and out of Illinois. Their homes were burned, their fields destroyed. They crossed the endless prairie westward with wooden handcarts into a desert valley where almost nothing grew at first. Whoever failed to prepare, whoever stored no supplies for that first hard winter, did not survive it. For these people, self-reliance was no pious theory. It was the bare difference between life and death. By the time the Depression swept across the country, that memory was still fresh and alive within the community. The first signs of the system showed up in small things. Mothers who canned every summer whatever the garden produced. Fathers who bought one more sack of flour than the week required. Basements that did not stay empty but filled up slowly, jar by jar, sack by sack. What began with individual families grew into the teaching of the whole church. Loose habits became a deliberate principle, preached from the pulpit and passed down to the next generation. Out of this history came a program that today carries a quiet name: Provident Living. No bunker thinking, no apocalypse, no fear. Just the plain, almost old-fashioned idea that a family should be ready for hard times long before they arrive. And the recommendation was wisely staged from the very start. Not the huge year's supply right away, the one that overwhelms everyone. First, a manageable 3-month supply made of what you eat every single day. Then, slowly and without pressure, the step-by-step build toward a full year. That one decision, to start small, would carry the entire system. That exact staging is the reason the system works where almost all others fail. And here is a question worth sitting with before we go on. Think honestly about your own home for a second. If the shelves emptied tomorrow the way they did in 2020, how many days could your family actually eat from what is already in your kitchen right now? 3 days? A week? Most people have never once counted, and the number is almost always lower than they guess. Drop your honest answer in the comments, just the number of days, because I read them and the spread is going to surprise you. Hold that number in your head because everything that follows is built to change it. Now let us look at how the system is actually built, because this is where an idea becomes a plan that any family at any kitchen table in the world can copy. The first step is almost disappointingly simple. You do not start with expensive specialty food, not with silver emergency kits, and not with bunker gear. You start with what is already in the kitchen cupboard. Pasta, cans, rice, preserves, oil, the things the family already eats every single week. The 3-month supply is, at its core, nothing more than a slightly larger supply of completely normal, everyday food. The real trick lies not in the what, but in the pace. Instead of driving to the warehouse store once and loading up the trunk with several $100s of goods, you simply add a few extra items to every ordinary weekly shop. 2 more cans of beans than you need, a second bag of rice on the shelf, a box of salt in reserve, 1 extra jar of honey. Over the weeks, the supply grows almost unnoticed, without the household budget ever really feeling the difference. A few dollars per trip, and after a few months there stands a supply in the basement that carries the family 3 full months, even if not a single cent more came into the house starting tomorrow. Only after that does the second part begin, the actual long-term storage, and it consists of surprisingly few, surprisingly cheap staple foods that last almost forever: wheat, rice, oats, dried beans, sugar, salt. These 6 simple things form the entire foundation. They cost almost nothing per pound, and they deliver exactly the calories and the protein a human being needs for sheer survival. A single sack of wheat for a few dollars holds the concentrated energy of weeks of meals. Whoever has these 6 basics in quantity in the house has secured the backbone of nutrition long before they need to think about anything expensive. And this is where the one detail that truly makes the difference comes in. Raw wheat, just sitting in a sack in the basement, does not last a year. Stored correctly, it lasts 30. The method behind it is astonishingly simple and costs almost nothing. You pour the dry wheat into a food-grade bucket, place a silvery mylar-bag inside, drop in a small oxygen absorber, and seal the bag shut with a hot iron. With no oxygen inside, no insect survives, no spoilage sets in, no mold grows. A single bucket of wheat prepared on one quiet afternoon for only a few dollars will outlast the family and still stand ready to eat in the basement 30 years from now. Remember this one detail well. It is the real reason the entire system can be so unbelievably cheap. Whoever does not want to walk this path entirely alone gets help from the community itself. In Salt Lake City stands the so-called Bishop's Storehouse, the storehouse of the bishop. From the outside, it looks like a perfectly ordinary supermarket. Long shelves full of canned goods, neatly lined sacks of flour, the warm smell of fresh-baked bread drifting through the aisles. But something is missing. There are no checkouts. Whoever is in genuine need receives food here without paying a single cent. The members who can afford it refill the shelves again and again through their donations and their own labor. It is a safety net built not from money, but from decades of foresight. With that, the entire system stands ready. 3 months of perfectly normal supply as a cushion. A long-term foundation of 6 cheap staple foods. A storage method that keeps wheat fresh for 30 years. And a network of storehouses for the ultimate emergency. Everything was in its place, yet the real secret of this system never lay in the full shelves. It lay in a single idea that almost every outsider gets completely wrong. Because this is exactly where it gets truly interesting. The vast majority of people who seriously want to build a supply fail at it. And they fail not because of money, as almost everyone assumes. They fail because of the way they go about the whole thing in the first place. They see a looming crisis on the news, fall into a panic, and drive to the nearest warehouse store that very same day. They spend several $100s in a single weekend, haul whole mountains of cans home, stack them hastily in the basement, and feel safe for a moment. And then nobody could explain why exactly this expensive supply was half spoiled a year later, the hard-spent money simply wasted. This is genuinely worth pausing on for a second. The panic buy approach feels absolutely right in the moment. It is fast, it is visible, it instantly soothes the guilty conscience, but it is at the same time the exact reason so many of these supplies end up in the trash. In the panic, you mostly buy things you do not eat in everyday life. You quickly lose track and forget what is even in the basement. And so one expiration date after another passes while the cans stand untouched and forgotten in the dark, slowly becoming useless. The Mormon system does the exact opposite on every single point, and that is precisely where its whole quiet power lies. It deliberately builds slowly, a few dollars at a time, over years rather than over one hectic weekend. And in doing so, it follows a single, almost laughably simple principle that changes everything. Store what you eat, and eat what you store. The supply is not a sacred shrine that you set up once and then never touch again. It is a living, constant cycle. You regularly eat from the supply and refill what was eaten right away. The oldest item on the shelf is always used first. The freshly bought goods move to the very back. Read that one sentence again. Store what you eat and eat what you store. As banal as it sounds at first glance, it solves in one stroke the one big problem that almost every other supply dies of: silent waste. Nothing expires unnoticed anymore, simply because everything is constantly in motion. The supply shrinks and grows again, over and over, like a lung that calmly breathes in and out. And because you consistently buy only what you would eat anyway, you never again spend money on things that end up rotting unused in the basement. That was exactly the decisive difference in the spring of 2020. While outside, some people stripped the shelves and bought in sheer panic, countless Mormon families simply walked calmly down to their own basement. Their supply had not been built overnight in a frenzy. It had grown slowly over many years, almost invisibly, a few dollars on every shopping trip. They did not have to hoard, simply because they had never stopped slowly and steadily preparing. That is the core that most people completely overlook. Preparedness is not a single grand action in a crisis. It is a quiet habit over years. So where do these storage plans fail concretely in the detail? The first and most common mistake is the famous all at once. Whoever really wants to buy everything in a single weekend inevitably spends too much, buys the wrong things in the rush, and loses all motivation after a short time. The effort crushes them before the system ever had a chance to become a habit. The second big mistake is pure storing with no eating at all. A supply that is proudly set up once and then never touched again spoils slowly and completely in silence. It is the cans you forget at the very back of the shelf, the flour that turns rancid after months and takes on a musty smell, the good money that ends up unnoticed in the trash without it ever occurring to anyone. A supply without rotation is not a supply, but only an expensive, slowly decaying pile. The third mistake is the tempting urge to start right away with expensive specialty food instead of the simple staples. The shiny emergency kits look reassuringly professional on the shelf, but they often cost 10 times as much as a plain sack of wheat with exactly the same amount of energy. Whoever begins with the most expensive of all is very quickly broke and still has only a little real supply standing in the basement. The Mormon system deliberately turns this order completely around. First comes the cheap and extremely durable, the broad foundation. The expensive and special comes, if at all, only at the very end. And the fourth mistake is the widespread belief that you absolutely need a lot of space, or even a dedicated room for this. You simply do not. One family in Salt Lake City stored their entire year's supply spread out under the beds in the back of the closets and in a tiny pantry next to the kitchen that they lovingly and jokingly called their little mini store. No bunker, no basement remodel, no expensive addition. Just a clever, almost playful use of the space that already exists in any normal household anyway. These four sober mistakes together explain why the vast majority of well-meaning storage plans quietly die in the drawer, and why this one system has now been alive and surviving for almost 100 years. It is never the money that tips the scale, it is always the method alone. And yet, if we are completely honest, all of this in the end is not about the bare survival of some great catastrophe at all. That is perhaps the biggest surprise of this whole system. In the community, even the children learn self-reliance remarkably early, often long before they are even 10 years old. They help their parents with the summer canning, with refilling the shelves, with patiently rotating the cans from back to front. Preparedness is for these children not a threatening emergency plan, but a complete matter of course, as normal and everyday as brushing their teeth in the morning. By far the greatest benefit of the system, in fact, shows up not in the rare crisis, but every day in the completely ordinary routine. A well-filled storage basement noticeably lowers a family's ongoing grocery costs. Whoever buys in bulk, buying staples when they're especially cheap, and then lives slowly and steadily from that supply, pays measurably less for food over the years than someone who buys essentials at full price every week. One family once told how, during the long, financially tight training years of the father, they lived almost entirely from their own supply. Through that whole hard time, they did not have to take out a single loan for food alone. The full basement, which their own parents had once given them as a wedding gift, carried them calmly and safely through the hardest phase of their lives. There is certainly a version of this whole story in which all of it sounds menacingly like pure fear. Like dark bunkers, like the apocalypse, like deep mistrust of the entire rest of the world. But whoever really looks more closely and speaks with the people themselves almost always finds the exact opposite. The members of the community say it themselves, and they say it in agreement. The real return on all this effort is in the end not the food in the basement at all. It is peace of mind. It is the calm, deep knowledge that your own family is provided for and safe no matter what happens out in the world. No frantic panic buying, no bear panic in the aisles, no empty trembling hands at the supermarket checkout. Just a warm light in the basement and shelves that stand calm and full. If even one idea from this stuck with you, do this before you click away. Subscribe to Provident Ways, because every week we break down one more of these old, quiet methods. The next one is the $5 bucket trick that stores wheat for 30 years, and you do not want to miss it. Hit the like button if you believe a family should be ready before the crisis, not during it, and tell me down in the comments which single staple you are going to add to your cart this week. Wheat, rice, oats, or beans, because the people who write it down are the ones who actually start. Maybe the real supply of these families was never the flour and the wheat in the buckets. Maybe from the very beginning it was the deep calm that slowly grew out of it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.